Hi, I'm Simon from Sailing BRITICAN, and we demonstrate what it's really like to live aboard a boat. It's not all fun, sun and sand and sea. It's a lot of hard work, especially on keeping the boat maintained. This is episode 2 of 3 about boat batteries, and last episode we covered what kind of batteries you have on your boat, how to check the physical condition of your battery bank, how to check marine boat battery health, and finally the importance of securing your battery bank. If you missed this video, click the link here and get the associated article, or have a look below. So in this episode, me and Aaron, a fellow cruiser and a certified electrician, are going to cover how to maintain your batteries, how to check that your battery voltage meter is reading correctly, the importance of finding out that your battery monitor is reading correctly, what you should think about your strategy on dealing with your batteries, confirm how much power you're actually getting from either your wind generator or solar, and then we finish with other maintenance that is important for your batteries. I suggest you keep watching, especially on the third one, because it will show you how important it is to keep these batteries, because this is your lifeline. You need these batteries to be working as best as possible for you to enjoy your time out there. We've got the boat, we figured out that they're decent batteries and we're quite happy with them. We don't need to change them. How do we keep them maintained and look after them and mother them, as like I call it?
Yeah. The first thing is get to know them. Mm-hmm. It's almost like a relationship you have with them. It sounds kind of funny, but it's true. Quite regularly I'm on customers' boats regarding battery problems or voltage problems, and I'll ask the question, so when you're making coffee in the morning, what's your typical voltage level on your house battery bank? And after the sun goes down and you're maybe making your last cocktail, or you're making your tea and you're getting ready to go to bed, what's your battery voltage like then? And a surprising amount of the time people don't know.
I know.
It's important. You should just know. You should be able to ask yourself, hey, at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, what's my normal voltage level?
Yeah.
And at 10 p.m., what should I expect? And if you glance over there at 10 p.m. and you see something wildly different from that, mm-hmm. you've caught a problem before it becomes
a major issue.
Yeah. So you should just know what to expect, and before you know it, you'll be doing it without thinking of it. Yeah. It just becomes part of the routine. As you're walking past the nav station, you just glance and go, yeah, cool, and on you go.
Because these are your lifeline. This is your power, your lights. This is everything. And everybody that has an issue with their house battery bank says it is a nightmare. It is probably one of the worst things to happen, because you can't do anything, can you really? It's the heart of your boat, it really is, and you really have to look after them, and people don't. I'm afraid to say. And
if you're looking at them regularly, if you know what to expect or what should be happening at that time of day, you could easily head off a problem before you lose everything in your freezer, everything in your refrigerator.
Exactly.
All of a sudden you go to haul up your anchor and you can't. A lot of bad things can happen. So, so the first thing to do is, if you don't have a voltmeter on your boat, mm-hmm. get one.
Yeah.
A lot of boats don't, and it's really important. So if you do have a voltmeter and it's up there in your nav station, and you've been, whether you look at it often or not, the next thing to do is to make sure it's accurate.
Yeah.
I've been in a lot of customers' boats where they have one and they point to it and it's clearly not right.
So how would we do that?
Yeah. So get your handy dandy multimeter out.
Okay.
We're going to put it back on that voltage setting.
All right.
And we're going to measure it right at the battery. And the reason that we're measuring it right at the battery and not anywhere else is because there could be some voltage loss along the way through the wiring, and I want to know what it's at exactly at the battery. Mm-hmm. Your voltage monitor should also be measuring it there, but as we just said, there can be issues with it. Mm-hmm. So let's first find out what we should be expecting right at the battery. So I'm going to measure across here and here. This is a 24 volt bank, so I have to measure across 2 batteries. And we are at 27.14.
27.14.
Okay. Now let's walk over to your voltmeter and let's see what that says and if it's relatively accurate.
Oh, the pressure.
Right, Simon, so what are we seeing?
We are seeing 27.10.
All right. So that is very close to what we measured.
Yeah.
I mean, there's
Point
little
four,
to no
point zero
loss.
four.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a very accurate battery meter. So now you can believe what your handy dandy
Yeah,
gizmo
and
says.
the loss is because of the length of the wire coming up to
Sure.
that.
And the connections.
And the
Yeah, but
connection.
that's minimal loss.
Yes,
Yeah.
27.14. Exactly.
So as long as the connections are clean,
Yeah.
you don't need to test every single battery. But it doesn't hurt to just hit a couple points and test a battery here, test a battery there, because it's true, one of these connections could be a little bit corroded, and so it's good to make sure that they're all measuring the same.
The system on BRITICAN is working and it's reading right. So what happens if there is a big discrepancy between what the batteries say and what your monitor says? So what happened? Why is that?
Yeah, good point. Good question. I see it often, and it's almost always due to corrosion. Corrosion here or there or somewhere else, and we're going to talk a bit more about that in just a minute.
Okay.
Another thing about your battery monitor is a lot of them will measure current, so amps in,
Yeah.
amps out,
Yeah.
and percent state of charge. So I just wanted to talk briefly about that. Make sure that your monitor is programmed correctly.
Yeah.
Make sure it knows what type of battery it's looking at.
Yeah.
Most monitors you'll program that. And also that the size of the house bank is programmed in your monitor correctly.
Yeah.
And thirdly, you need to adjust the size of your battery bank in that monitor every year or so.
Okay.
If you start out with, let's say, a 500 amp hour AGM house bank, in 3 years, it's not a 500 amp hour house bank anymore.
No.
Depending on how it's been treated, it might be a 400 amp hour house bank. And so you need to reprogram that maybe every year or so to adjust that.
Because if you could say you're at 500 and 3 years later they're at 300 amp hours,
Right.
you're going to get a totally false reading, and it says, yeah, my batteries are still good, but they're dangerously low.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most monitors will reset and recalibrate themselves, but only if you bring them to fully charged. Its amp hour counter needs to get to 0, and then it will continue on into the positives,
Yeah.
and it'll keep going into positives and positives until the charging stops, and then it will take that as fully charged, and it will kind of reset its
To
zero
zero,
point.
yeah.
But if you're constantly undercharging your batteries and it's never getting to that point, it gets lost, and the percent state of charge becomes meaningless quickly. Maybe once a year or so to disconnect them, because you might find one bad apple amongst the bunch, and it's pulling the whole bank down.
Yeah.
It's not so common with brand new batteries, but if the bank is getting along in age, it's good to do. And also, by doing that, you're going to take off all of these lugs, and you'll be able to clean up all the connections, which is always a good thing to do.
It is. And going back to the monitor system we have here, it took 3 attempts over about 3 months for it to actually start working properly.
Sure.
And it was driving me nuts, and then I kept doing it, and then bang, it came in. So it's actually learning. It seems like it's learning all the time.
It does, and it's important to read the manual. You think, well, it's just a simple little thing. It's not really.
No.
So over morning coffee sometime, sit down, read the manual, learn how to put in your bank size, learn how to put in your battery type. It's not that complicated, and it's letting you get more familiar with your bank, more familiar with your instrument, and you'll be able to know when it's lying to you. I would say as much as half of the boats I go on to, customers' boats, their battery monitors are lying to them.
Yeah.
And it's not really lying, you know.
Yeah, I know,
they're just
yeah.
out of calibration, so the owner thinks one thing is happening, and it's actually not.
Well, I knew mine. We need to figure out how we're going to charge them and the strategy. So what strategy should we be using to keep these batteries in the best health that we possibly can?
Yeah. Obviously, it depends.
Yeah.
It depends on what you have in your boat.
Yeah.
Everybody's setup is different, and it's most important to understand what you have.
Yep.
And how each one should be working, and what's going to be most efficient for you on a day-to-day basis. Every boat out there, everybody that's listening, has a slightly different charging setup on their boat. Most have a shore charger,
Yep.
So shore power inlet when you're at the dock. Some have solar, some have wind, some have a genset, whether it's an inboard, diesel genset or a portable Honda.
Yep.
There's all different ways that you can charge it. If you're a new boat owner, it's very important to understand what you have.
Yes.
You might think you have wind, but might not be doing anything. You might think you have 1,000 watts of solar, but you might only be achieving half of that.
Yes.
And so it's important to know what you have and then to see if it's working correctly. And then understand and come up with the most efficient way throughout a given day or given week to keep your battery bank charged up. If solar and wind, those are almost free once they're installed, essentially. Yep. So you want to maximize usage of that, and ideally minimize genset usage
Yep.
and shore power usage, because those cost money in gallons and amp hour on your post meter.
Yes, exactly. So
just an example, we have a solar charger sitting right here.
Yep.
And this one has a meter on the front. A lot of them don't. Sometimes they have Bluetooth on the phone. But it's good to know that it's delivering what we would expect it to deliver.
Okay, so how would we sort that out?
Yeah, a really handy tool to have on your boat is an amp clamp meter.
Yes.
You can get them at most any hardware store. Doesn't have to be a fancy marine thing. Mm-hmm. And it'll also double as your multimeter. It does everything that a normal multimeter would do. Mm-hmm. So in my kit of tools, I have, a half a dozen different meters like this for different types of tests. But this is kind of a good, sturdy, all-round one that does amp clamps. And so on your multimeter, and again, we'll cover this in a separate video, but we'll put it on amps. Yep. And we're going to take the output of the solar charger that's going to the battery bank. We followed it around and found the wire here.
Yep.
And it's as easy as this. Done. It says 27 amps. So right now, from your solar panels, you have 27 amps coming out of your charger into your battery bank. Okay. And if we look at the front screen, I see 27.6 amps.
20.6.
So it's almost spot on.
Okay.
So we know that your solar charger is
working as it should.
As it should, and that's based on your solar panel array.
That's good.
That's about what I would expect at this time of day.
Yeah. And it's midday. You need a strategy, and with the last batteries we had before we got the lithiums, I ordered a certain type of battery. I was promised it. They didn't come, but they sold me the batteries, and it was over Christmas and New Year, and we had to get out. So I bought these batteries. I wasn't happy about it. They were so underpowered for this boat. It was unbelievable. In fact, I had 150 amps for this boat. Yes, 150 amps, which was just terrible. But that was all I had. The issue with that, and I didn't have the solar, I didn't have any renewable energy that way. All I had was the generator. If I was on the dock, we had the shore, and when the engine was running, the house alternator was charging them. But that meant, because we're such a big boat and we're such a power-hungry boat, I was having to run the 2 hours in the morning, the generator, and an hour and a half at night. It was ridiculous. I was forever servicing the generator, and that's why we got the solar, and that's why we changed to the lithiums afterwards. But yeah, my strategy was I had to run it twice a day because I was always looking up at the charger. I'm like, where's the gone? The battery's got no powers. I've got that in. And it was a pain.
But the key thing is that you had a strategy regardless of what you had.
Yeah.
When you didn't have solar, you knew you had to run the engines, run the genset, because you were taking care of your bank. And then after you solar, that strategy completely changed and you made a new one. But it's important to have it.
Well, I had to really baby them because they were in two banks, and if one bank had got down, I had 75 amps.
Yeah.
That's nothing.
You can't blow dry your hair.
I know, that's why I'll go like this. What other maintenances we need to do by just looking at the batteries? What can we do to keep them in the best condition that we can possibly do?
Yeah. The most common thing I see whether I'm visiting a boat because there's power problems, I look anyway. The most common thing I see is corrosion on the battery terminals, especially in start batteries when they're maybe in an engine compartment. It's a little bit more of a caustic environment. But you'll come and you can see how your lugs here are nice and clean and shiny. They're not green, they're not brown, there's no rust, there's no white build. Oftentimes you'll see some white, some white buildup. If you see that, you just bought a boat or you're just now getting to know your batteries, if you see corrosion, is de-energize your DC system on your boat. So turn off all your breakers, find your battery switch, turn those off, shut everything off, right? And then one at a time, remember we talked earlier about you don't want to cross posts. One at a time, you'll take this nut off, you'll back it off, and you'll take these two. Maybe you want to tape the ends, or if you have a way to securely set them aside, you want to, with a wire brush, or with sandpaper, or with a file. So this is a needle file that's really good for getting into tight places. Or just some medium grade sandpaper works really good. You can use contact cleaner, but usually that's more useful in smaller gauge wires when you're up by your breakers and things like that. And things get a little more technical when you get into contact cleaner. Down here you need something a little bit more
robust,
heavy duty. And so you can go at this with sandpaper or files or things like that, and make them shiny again. And do each lug and then come onto the post of battery and clean that up. Once everything is nice and clean and you've wiped them off, it's very good to use something called dielectric grease. This is a baby bottle. You can get them in very big containers. And it's just a silicone compound, and you don't have to go crazy. I've come onto boats and seen that there's just compound and grease all over the place. It only needs to be on the mating surface in around that area. And so just these metal surfaces, just a small little bit of this silicone dielectric compound will prevent corrosion.
Once we cleaned them all up, you have to make sure that they're all really nice and tight, don't we?
Yes.
Because if they're all flapping about and bobbling about.
So number one, keep them clean. Number two, keep them tight. These are big cables, and oftentimes because they're bending, sometimes the older cables, they get more stiff. These are fairly new and still pretty pliable. There can be a fair amount of strain on these. And so you want to make sure that these are very tight. You should be able to, I'm really torquing on them and they're not moving. That's great. Any wire over 6 AWG, you're not allowed to use wing nuts on the battery. So oftentimes I'll see, they seem handy because you can tighten them up by hand and unloosen them. But anything over 6 gauge, don't use a wing nut. I recommend don't ever use them. But ABYC says anything over 6 gauge, you're no longer within the standards. You want to use a good, properly sized bolt, a lock washer, and a nut. And don't ever put a washer in between the face of your battery lug and its mating surface. Also, if there's multiple things going on a post, like here, right? You want to put the largest lug on first. And then smaller as you work out towards the nut. Okay, so this is correct. Big and then small on the outside. Thirdly, you don't ever want to have more than 4 lugs on a post. I've seen some pretty fantastic installations where there's 9 things on one post and wires are going this way and spliced in, and then it was very frightening. So everything that's here is great. You're starting with the heaviest and working out to the smaller, and there's not more than 4 in any post.
So as my old boss used to say, keep it tight
and keep things neat. Clean, keep them tight, and keep them neat. That is very important when you start troubleshooting something. For example, if there was 9 different things on here, it's very hard to start troubleshooting and isolating the problem child. You have a bus bar here, and so it's very easy to work your way through because things.
Do you have any questions about basic things you should know about your boat's electrical system? Do you know how to troubleshoot those systems? And are you curious as to when you should or should not call an expert? Get a copy of our free electrical systems audit for boaters so you can be proactive with your boat electrics, which means less stress, fewer costs and no nasty surprises. Follow the link located at the top right corner, or you can find it below in the description. So that concludes part 2 of 3. I hope you enjoyed it. In our next episode we're going to cover what routines you need to do while sailing on an anchor, when you should charge them up to 100%, fully charge them, or how low can you take your batteries, how to equalize your batteries. And you must understand how your batteries will depreciate over time. And then we finish up how to get help if you ever need it. So please subscribe and like our video. Okay, bye!